What's going on, everybody? This is your boy Mitch of Mitchspiration. Welcome to my channel. My channel is all about life, manhood, motivation, and spiritual development. If any of those things are important to you, please make sure you like and subscribe and always comment. I love interacting with my followers and my subscribers. If you're back for your numerous times, you already know what it is. Thank y'all for continuing to subscribe. I know it's been a little minute. I haven't been on here in a while, but I'm kind of in a new environment. I actually just got a new home, my first home, along with my wife and my son. So we're excited about being homeowners. I'll probably do a little house tour, some content on that a little later. We only been here for maybe like 2.5 months, so there's still work to be done. But that's a whole nother story for a whole nother day. Right now, I want to talk about today's episode of Just My Thoughts, right? So today's episode of Just My Thoughts is going to be my point of view, kind of now that the dust is settled and everything with this whole Kendrick Lamar versus Drake beef, and where, in my point of view, I feel like Drake went wrong, right? So as always, you know me, I don't come if I don't come correct. So I got my laptop here with my notes because I want to make sure I get all my thoughts out. Also, my son is asleep in my room, so I want to make sure that like I do this real quickly and efficiently before he wakes up from his nap. But everybody knows about how this Kendrick and Drake beef has been going. It's actually a culmination of a lot of things that have been happening over time, man. I think this dates back to maybe 10 years or so, if not farther back. So it's been a long time going, man. But to get this thing started, the first thing I think Drake really messed up with is his mainstream status, right? So I always say that there are certain calibers of artists who, when they get to a certain point, their fans really hold them down to a point where it's like they can't do any wrong. Me, I'm a huge fan of certain artists like Jay-Z, but I understand that when he does certain songs or when he does certain features, he's not really giving us all he got. You know what I mean? And so as a fan, I'm looking for that. I'm looking for them bars. So when he kind of slack, I get upset. But there's other fans who are like, it's still Jay-Z, da 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 da. Nah, like I got that expectation. I want you to bring that fire every time. Um, but yeah, so I think Drake, obviously, he's like the face of rap music. And I think it's just because he's so big, he was under this assumption that like he's invincible, right? Because he's big from a mainstream standpoint, it means he's invincible, right? Because he has the largest fan base. He grosses the largest money from tours and things along those lines. He makes the most hits. These are all things that I give Drake credit for. He's a great entertainer. He knows how to make hits, all that. But rap beef is not a mainstream hustle. It's not a mainstream project, I guess is the right word. So we take it back to Big Sean Control. When Kendrick dropped his Control verse, a lot of people were asking Drake about his point of view. And I felt like Drake was kind of being real passive aggressive, like, oh, the verse was good for the time, but I bet you can't tell me how the verse starts. Or like being like passive aggressive towards Kendrick. It was like, I'm not saying people were forcing Drake to take on the beef, but they were asking his point of view. And because he didn't rebuttal along with other hundreds of artists, I would say that rebutted, especially New Yorkers, if you remember Kendrick's bar about people from New York and stuff like that. But for Drake not to rebuttal at all, as the face of rap, I guess certain people were trying to get his point of view. And so in that moment, Drake kind of portrayed himself like, oh, I'm above this. I knew what Kendrick was trying to do, but this moment has kind of passed over. Nobody cares anymore, which, depending on who you are, you didn't care anymore. But yeah, I think, even from that, Kendrick bouncing back and mentioning Drake in the BET Awards, talking about tucking a sensitive rapper back in his pajama clothes, it's just been a culmination of things, and it came to a head in this beef. The biggest error, one of the biggest errors Drake made, in my opinion, was mentioning Kendrick's woman, right? He did the same thing with Pusha T, if you remember. Like, the beef wasn't really heated with Push until Drake mentioned Pusha T's wife. And so Drake really intensified the beef at that moment because when you bring up somebody's woman, all the gloves come off. And so the same way that happened with Pusha T and he lost is pretty much what happened with Kendrick Lamar. He brought up Kendrick's girl And that's all she wrote. It went up from there. I know Kendrick was really trying to keep this like friendly, but due to Drake being Drake and doing things Drake way, which is funny because a lot of things Drake does is centered around women, but that's a whole nother conversation. So yeah, so my thing is, it gives me the impression that Drake may envy the fact that like Kendrick and Pusha T are in committed relationships with women who have bore their kids. Like everybody know Drake's kid is him having a one night fling with like a has been porn star or something. Like, and so Drake raps about all this emotional thing and relationship related things, but he's never had a committed relationship. Whether that's his fault or not is beside the point. So I think sometimes Drake comes off a little bit of a hater or envious, and he attacks men who have committed relationships with women who have like had their kids and things like that. And I feel like because of Drake mentioning companions, he was first exposed by hiding his kid, right? So when he mentioned Pusha T's girl, Pusha T was like, "Cool, you want to talk family? Let's talk about the son you hiding." You know what I'm saying? So that's how we found out Drake was actually a dad and all this and that. And so that's the second thing. So like mentioning people's women is not the move if you trying to like win the beef. That ain't, if you're gonna bring that up as a jab, you got to be able to come and stand with whatever comes from that. And I don't think Drake handled that well. Also, I think some of Drake's angles were relatively weak. Some of the things that really he could really talk about, like he talked about Kendrick Lamar's height, his shoe size, this speculated domestic abuse situation between Kendrick and his girl. He tried to say that Kendrick's best friend and manager, Ep.3, was the father of one of the kids. And then he used this whole thing about Kendrick raps like he's trying to free the slaves. And I know Kendrick had brought up the fact that Drake kind of portrays himself sometimes with like proving his blackness based on the artists he works with. So, you know, Future, that's one kind of club spectrum of music where blackness is really big. 21 Savage is street, Little Baby is a street rapper. So associating himself with all these like guys from the streets, I guess Kendrick saw that as Drake trying to prove that like even though I'm not from the streets and but I'm hanging with street people, I get a pass, whatever the case may be. Even Drake mentioning like, somebody who from LA and represent my homie YG, like LA, like one thing like Drake don't know like LA gang politics well enough to be talking about that. So that's why my fourth point was like him bringing up other people's name in their beef, right? So bringing up YG, like what does YG have to do with you battling Kendrick? Because at the end of the day, I heard a battle rapper named Sue Surf say this, like there's a lot of people who are from the streets, who are from street essence. You got your people who are in the hood, gang banging, doing whatever, and then you got the kid who lives in the hood that's super smart, or the kid who's a hooper. Technically, he from the block too. Technically, he from the block because he lived there, but there's still a difference between people who from the block and who are actively in these streets doing work. And so Drake was trying to make this impression like, oh, Kendrick doesn't have no hood credibility and stuff like that, when we all know Kendrick is from a very heavily flooded Pyru neighborhood. His best friends are Pyrus. So like we get that. We know what comes with that. You know what I'm saying? So I just felt like that was a bad angle altogether. My battery's dying. Let me change the battery. I'll be right back. All right, y'all, my bad. A little technical difficulty with that whole thing. I had to change the battery out. But yeah, like Drake didn't really gain anything by mentioning YG. And if I'm not mistaken, I actually think YG made a diss track to Drake telling him like, yo, like don't put my name in your business. And I think he ended up calling Drake like a clown and stuff in the song because of that. But here's my thing, right? So my ultimate thing is like, if Drake is the face of rap music, and if he's had this passive aggressive tone towards Kendrick since the early stages, like if you're the face, why even respond, right? So I think in essence, Drake's biggest mistake was actually responding to Kendrick Lamar, period, because like if you got more record sales, more streams, more money, more of everything from a mainstream standpoint, then what Kendrick is doing should technically be below you, right? Like, it's not like Kendrick had called Drake out by name and said all this personal stuff prior to this beef. Like, Kendrick was still being very calculated and subliminal. Um, and he just was really doing it for the sport to really like get people to rap. There was a lot of like music being made and mumble rap and stuff like that. And Kendrick's like, yo, I want to make these boys rap. Like, what do I got to do to make them rap? And so, obviously we know J. Cole was the first to respond and he gracefully bowed out, which in hindsight, I think he was the smartest person throughout this whole situation. But yeah, man, so my point was, if you're the king of rap, what king comes off his throne to address a court jester or a lower level artist like Kendrick Lamar unless you genuinely see them as a threat? So this is one thing Drake fans have to admit. Regardless of how big Drake views himself, Drake knows music and Drake knows the rappers who are just as good, if not better than him. That's why he's giving J. Cole his flowers. That's why he's even giving Kendrick Lamar his flowers. Will that happen now since the beef has popped off? Probably not. But deep down in the heart of hearts, Drake knows Kendrick is one of them. Lyrically, Drake ain't better than Kendrick Lamar. I can go into detail about that. That's a whole nother video for a whole nother day. But my whole thing is just, bro, like, why even go there? You know what I'm saying? Like, why even put yourself in the ring with somebody if you feel like you're better than them? And that's also like my issue with Nicki Minaj too, right? Like, she kind of self-proclaimed herself to be the queen of rap in a season in rap music when not a lot of women were putting out music. We didn't have Missy dropping nothing. We didn't have Remy Ma dropping nothing. Cardi B wasn't a thing yet. Meg Thee Stallion wasn't a thing yet. Lotto wasn't a thing yet. So Nicki really didn't have competition. So for me, it doesn't make sense for you to call yourself the king or queen of anything until you've shown that you can go at it with the best of them, whether that's through record sales or whatever the case may be. But one thing that I've also learned about Nicki Minaj is like, you call yourself the queen, but anytime a new female artist come out or a female artist does numbers on their first hit single or whatever, it's like you got to pop out with an EP or a song to remind people you the queen. And it's like, bro, what you've done in the game is great, but that doesn't mean these other people coming in the game ain't great either. You know what I mean? So that's just always kind of been my thing. I'm analytical. I look into all the details, right? So I could be mistaken, but I don't remember during like the beginning portions of Nicki Minaj's career there being a surplus of female rappers out there for her to really compete with. So for her to call herself the queen, like, I mean, I get it, but nah, you know what I mean? But like I said, it says and I wrote this down in my notes. This just shows that Drake is well aware of how great Kendrick is as an artist and wanted to pursue the beef to improve his credibility as a rapper. Like I just said, Drake understands who can really rap and who can't. So if he can get into this beef with Kendrick and win, that gives him more credibility for the people who, really doubt him. And the big part of that is because Drake, it's really undetermined how much of his lyrics are his. We've seen him, have numerous ghostwriters. We've seen him copy lyrics verbatim, word for word, the words, the tone, the cadence, all that. So from a greatness standpoint, yes, Drake will always go down as one of the greatest rappers to ever do it. But when it comes to that lyrical conversation, and I think people have a misconception of what true lyricism is, because when you look at the rappers who are super lyrical, they're not the ones selling the most records, selling out the most tours. Like, though, they're considered like B-list celebrities. Like, they get a lot of respect from those hip hop heads in like the streets, the people who really understand lyricism. But on a mainstream level, people ain't trying to hear that. All people want is a beat they can nod their head to and some catchy words. And there's a difference between lyricism and having catchy words. And so if anything, I would say Drake is more of a punchline rapper, not a lyricist. a lot of times his lyrics only have one meaning. I've heard Kendrick drop rhymes even in his beef that had multiple meanings. One line means three different things. And so when you got to start recycling other people's lyrics and borrowing from other people, you kind of put your credibility in question. And so once again, it just comes down to this: like, Drake fans are going to say Drake won. Kendrick fans are going to say Kendrick won. So it's really up to those people who are in the middle who are going to decide who actually won this beef. At one point, I was a huge Drake fan. Like, when he first came out, I think the first project I ever heard from Drake was called Heartbreak Drake. It was like a mixtape. And I was like, my best friend would tell you, like, I was super hard on Drake. Like, bumping Drake everywhere I went. But the more and more he started doing the melodic sound, I just didn't feel like that was where Drake's strong suit was. Like, Drake really came into the game rapping. And I always tell people this, like, I'm not saying Drake don't know how to rap. He can rap. But what I would like to see is one album from Drake. If Drake can give me 1 hour where he kind of has that, like, Lord knows flow for like 10, 12 songs, I will put Drake back in my top 10. But I can't put him in my personal top 10 right now because I just feel like he's doing more singing and rapping these days. But that's just me, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not knocking nobody who's a Drake fan. I don't have no beef with nobody who's a Drake fan. I'm a lover of music, but I'm also very much somebody who grew up listening to the Biggie Smalls, the Big L's, the Big Puns, the KRS-Ones, the Rakims. Like, those type of people are the first people who ever touched my ears musically when it came to rap and hip hop music. So my bar is really high. But overall, I also think Drake couldn't provide the type of facts that Kendrick could provide. Like, really, if we want to look at it in hindsight, Kendrick really won this beef when he dropped Euphoria, because he said he knew exactly what Drake was going to do. He said he was talking about issues on the family front because you heard Mr. Morale. So a lot of the things that, like, Drake mentioned as angles for this beef were things Kendrick rapped about in his Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers album that Drake misunderstood, because certain things that Kendrick rapped about that Drake brought up didn't have the meaning Drake was trying to make it mean. Whereas for Kendrick, he been studying this man. If you really take time to think about it, every move Kendrick made in this beef was calculated. And so, of course, like, there's this whole mantra of, like, when you're at the top of the mountain, everybody's going to come for you. The people who you were once cool with will become your rivals. But I think that's just the sport of music. Like, although Drake had a machine behind him with, like, Lil Wayne and Young Money co-signing him, and everybody else kind of had to get it out the mud. Like, even when J. Cole was signed to Roc Nation, Jay-Z won't pushing him like that. Like, Cole really was getting it out the mud. Same with Kendrick Lamar. And so, yes, I will say Drake did give Kendrick a big boost by allowing him to, like, be on his tour and open up shows. But it's still up to the crowd to receive that music. A lot of Drake fans are like, oh, if it wasn't for Drake, Kendrick, da 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 da. And I'm like, bro, I hear you, but at the same time, Kendrick could have opened up shows and got booed off stage. Like, people still have to have a choice of how they receive artists. You know what I'm saying? I've seen artists that Lil Wayne has signed that's performed that have been booed off stage, and Lil Wayne ended the show. But that just goes to show, like, the way people view Wayne ain't how people always gonna view Wayne's artists. Drake and Nicki were just two really good pushes that really over exceeded expectations. You know what I mean? But Wayne even said himself, he liked Drake because Drake was rapping for the everyday person. He wasn't rapping about being street and doing this and doing that. And he wanted Drake to stick to that. But obviously, over time, Drake has had those kind of bars in his raps where he's kind of taking, like, oh, I'm one of them, and he really not. But I say all that to say that I do think Kendrick Lamar won this beef. Not Like Us is a monumental beef record, and the fact that he was able to turn it into a music video speaks volumes for his creativity. But yeah, I just think Drake should have been more thoughtful in doing this beef. I don't know how many other people were involved in his writing process or whatever the case may be, but better work could have been done on Drake's part. And so that's just how I feel, man. It was good. It was good for the sport of music. Like, I'm not saying I want everybody to beef so we can hear rap bars again, but even musically, like the amount of quality rap coming out is steadily declining. Like rappers aren't hitting number one on the Billboard as frequently. They're not hitting number one at album sales as frequently. Like it's just a whole different game that we're walking into. So we need our Kendrick Lamars and our, J. Cole's and people like that who can shake the culture up and don't mind getting into the sport of it. Not making it personal, but getting into the sport of it, man. Because at the end of the day, like, if I'm on the track, I don't care if you're my best friend or my worst enemy. I'm trying to kill you regardless. Like, I'm trying to show you I'm the best person on this record. But yeah, y'all, be sure to share your thoughts in the comments. Some of y'all may disagree with my point of view. Some of y'all may agree. But I just thought now that the dust is settled and everybody's had time to like put their opinions out there, it was a time for me to be thoughtful and really get my thoughts together on, I feel like, the ways Drake could have done better and how he went wrong in this beef. But yeah, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit that bell notification so you don't miss anything happening on my page. Once again, this has been another installment of the Just My Thoughts series, and more content is to come. Until then, I love y'all. Peace.